Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the launch of the Innovation Law Club Africa in South Africa. So today we are very excited to host you and to give you a little bit of information about what innovation law means in terms of legal tech and innovation as well as technology law. We as an organization are looking to create content for you on an ongoing basis, beginning with tonight's launch event. And we have two pioneers, local pioneers in the space that will be joining us tonight. We have Lucien Pierce, who's a technology, media, and telecommunications lawyer and director at PPM Attorneys. He's going to talk to us about technology law in South Africa. And we have Leah Moletsedi, who's an attorney, legal technology and innovation specialist, and a published author and the co-founder of a legal tech startup called Lenoma Legal. I'm Narushka Bowen. I'm the founder of the Lit Institute, and I'll be your host for tonight. So I'm going to invite now our panelists to join us. Hi, Leah. Hi, Lucien.
Hi, Narushka. How are you?
I'm well, thanks, and you?
Great to see you. Hi, Leah.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thanks.
Hi, Leah. Thanks so much for you both for joining us today for this event. I know for both of you, these are topics that are passionate to your hearts and your careers are dedicated to these areas, and you have lots of knowledge and expertise to share. So we're quite excited to hear what you have to say, and we have attendees who are also very eager and excited to learn something today about you both and also about the areas that you practice in. So thank you very much. Leah, I'm going to start the conversation with you. So, today we are doing an introductory session for our participants, people who want to learn more about this space. And I think we'd like to start with actually learning a bit about your story. You're considered a legal tech innovator. You run a legal tech startup. How did you know about legal tech? How did you find out about the space? What's your story? Can you share with us?
Yeah, I fell upon legal technology a couple of years back, in 2017. I'd left corporate and I started a legal consulting company. So Lenoma Legal was actually a consulting company, but it happened that I actually could not meet with a client because at that stage I was still a young mom. The nanny didn't pitch, and I needed to find a way to still, see the client. So I suggested that we Skype. Luckily, the client was willing, so we then, started a Skype session. And after that, I then realized, oh, okay, I don't actually have to have face-to-face consultations, and that was back in 2017 before video conferencing, blew up. And that allowed me to actually look into other areas that I could integrate technology and just go virtual. So since then, we morphed and pivoted into a virtual legal tech startup that helps small businesses. And that helped a lot because I'm based in Bloemfontein. It helped us to scale much quicker because obviously, the jurisdictional areas and all of that, provincial areas were no longer an issue because all I had to do was just jump on, on a call with the client in order to assist them. So it started like that.
Okay, that's great and very inspiring as well, that you almost stumbled upon it, let's say. And I think for a lot of people in the space, it was a matter of stumbling upon these things and stumbling upon better ways of doing things. That kind of was the motivation behind getting you to where you are. Now, the other question I have for you, there's a lot of terminology in this space. So we have something called legal tech, we have legal innovation, law tech, legal design. And I think sometimes people get a bit confused as to what these various terminologies mean. Could you break down some of these terms for us?
Thank you. I think it's quite important specifically because you'll find a lot of people in the beginning that used to refer to me as a tech lawyer, and I'm actually not. My speciality is not in that area. So it's actually quite important that people understand the distinction. So for example, legal tech deals with technologies or software that helps facilitate the delivery of legal services with the
Mhm.
intervention of a lawyer. Whereas law tech deals with technology, but in delivering legal services, but there's no lawyer involved. Then you have tech law. This is solution space, that deals with data and all the shebang. I won't even try and explain that. I think he'll be better suited. But that really relates to regulating policy. I mean technology. That regulatory aspect of it. And then you have concepts which are truly intertwined into law tech and legal technology. Those are concepts like legal innovation that really speaks to finding innovative ways in the legal industry to provide legal services and making it easier for lawyers to actually do what we want to do. Concepts like legal design thinking, which is actually getting a bit of a buzz, and I think it's quite important because really the concept itself speaks to how you create a solution or how you really deal with a situation, but approaching it from a human-centered side. So, it's more human-centered. It includes different principles, cross disciplines. So it's legal thinking, design thinking, the concept itself, user experience. It's things that we don't, traditionally think about as lawyers. I mean, a client comes, you look at the problem and that's it. But there's an entire experience that a client goes through. More often than not, legal services is a grudge purchase for the average person. And how they interface with the law impacts their experience. And oftentimes it's not nice. And the way that we function and provide legal services can actually be changed simply by applying legal design principles. So, for example, looking at not only from a business side, in terms of any solutions that you're trying to build, but merely during the facilitation of your legal services. Are you empowering your client? Are you informing them beyond informing them of the legal processes? Are you, giving them enough information to actually, have an enjoyable, if that's possible, experience with you to actually be able, not only for your own business, but to actually be empowered as a client, or are you merely just regurgitating legal terminology to them? So it's simple things like that. It's also in how we draft our contracts. Most people don't understand legal contracts. They're difficult to read. So legal design thinking incorporates those types of concepts, inclusive of things like the plain language movement, where you're trying to, really ensure that the contracts that people are actually reading, they're meant for them. Contracts are not meant for us. I mean, it's exciting for some of us who love drafting as lawyers. The words sound nice and all, herewith and commencement. Why are you saying commencement when you can just start? You know,
Yeah.
you're making it difficult for a person to actually engage with the law. So legal design thinking tries to break those type of barriers that actually stand, in terms of people trying to integrate into law and interfacing with it in a more pleasurable way.
No, that's amazing. And what I'm getting from there is that to innovate in law is not only about implementing complex technology or implementing an AI, this or that. It could be as simple as simplifying your language using a contract so that people can understand your contract, designing your contract in maybe using color, using visuals, doing different things, just doing things differently and making law accessible. You become an innovator. So I think people maybe have this misconception, you have to be a techie and implement all sorts of technology, and it's so much more than that. There's so much room for improvement. I think that's a really good point that you brought up. And also I just want to find out, in the space, is it a saturated market? What about people who heard about it, want to be participate in the ecosystem of legal tech and innovation, but are quite new? Are there opportunities for newcomers?
In South Africa, we were literally ripe for innovation. you know, um, and I say this purely because previously the concept of legal tech is really obviously getting a big hype right now, but
Mm-hmm.
it's South Africa for a very long time. It's just that people are coming into this space. And so for myself, I needed to actually find a way to compartmentalize it and ensure that it actually makes sense. So for example, practice management software has been, been used by law firms for a very long time in South Africa. But people would not necessarily associate that with legal technology, whereas it also forms part of it. There are a lot of different categories in the legal tech space. It's not only just practice management, it's the provision of online services, the websites that people go to find legal services. So for example, your law marketplace, document automation. So the space itself, it's quite broad and literally ripe for anyone to, try and tap into. I'm actually excited from my end, seeing this, having started, this journey back then, and seeing the growth of it in South Africa, and more so specifically client-facing solutions. That for me is quite important, where we're seeing solutions where people are actually trying to make the law accessible for average citizens. So it's not really just about how we do things from an internal perspective, because, so for example, document automation can be used by law firms internally in order to fast track their document drafting, their reviews, and so forth. But people can actually do that just online, as and when they facilitate and get agreements online. So seeing those type of solutions actually come through has been very exciting for me.
That's awesome. And I think everything you're saying is sounding really positive. And I just wanted to find out, how does South Africa compare to the rest of the continent, and also on a global scale? Where do we sit in the broader legal tech and innovation ecosystem?
Well, actually, not that great. I mean, we're still a bit behind. So, for example, the guys in West Africa are leading. When you look at ecosystems like Hill that help in, justice innovations, when you look at, the past winners, most of them come through from West Africa. I'm really not sure, in terms of the reasoning why from our side in South Africa, but we're still lagging behind. But I think it's starting to come through, because when you look at the number of applications, so for example, he received 80 applications this year from Southern Africa, and that is a lot. Because when you look at Legal Tech Africa, the ecosystem that actually looks at legal tech startups, it was literally sitting at about 180, according to their registry. So when you look at that number and look at, the number of solutions and justice innovations coming through just from the Southern African region this year alone, tells us that, we're moving forward, we're getting in there. So it's a good time. It's a good time for us, really.
No, that's awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction and background into legal tech and innovation in South Africa. I'm just going to quickly deal with a question that we received. How does one join the ILCA? So the ILCA is a continental organization, and if you go to the ilca.africa website, you can join the platform. There's a membership sign up option to join the continental chapter. The ILCA South Africa chapter, which we are running separately, we don't have an independent sign up and website established yet. As you can see, we're just launching, and we're still quite new. If you did sign up using the Google form when you registered for this event, we then, and you also ticked yes that we can contact you in future. I know there were 5 of you who ticked no, so unfortunately we won't be contacting you in future, but for everybody else, well, once we do have the formal steps to sign up South African chapter, we will definitely distribute that so that you can be a formal member of the ILCA South Africa. But as I said, yes, we are in the early stages of establishment, and more info will be released as and when it comes along. So now I wanna jump to Lucy, and I know he's got so much to say, and we've been just ignoring him until now. So Lucy, I wanna bring you into the conversation. I also want to hear a little bit about your story. I mean, you're a technology lawyer, or a TMT lawyer, as it's sometimes called. What is your journey? How did you end up in tech law? Did you even know tech law existed before it, or did it find you? I think most of us who are in this space almost stumbled upon it. So I'd like to hear a bit about your journey.
Yeah, I thanks first of all for inviting me. Narushka. It's great to be on the show and great to be part of such a great initiative. Yeah, my story, as you say, is very similar to most people out there. And I literally stumbled over tech law. I started out serving articles in Durban and worked for a human rights firm doing work around sort of 1996, 1997, purely, almost exclusively work against the state post 94. And then I decided to take 2 years and travel and ended up passing through the UK and ran out of money. So basically applied for a position as a paralegal and was taken on by a law firm called Bird and Bird. And initially treated, I was basically the skivvy, which basically means I had to run around, make photocopies, etc. But the project that I was working on, the case that I was working on, was actually one of the biggest at the time. It was a dispute between BT, British Telecom, and Camelot, which ran the lottery. And there was a huge technology issue that caused a major glitch, resulting in millions of pounds being lost. So I worked on that case, and I thought, wow, this is exciting. Mainly because I had actually wanted to become an engineer, but I was too dwarf. My maths marks were terrible. Not that it was a bad thing. But for me, there was this overlap of technology and law, which really satisfied that desire to be an engineer and at the same time to practice law. So, of course, I stayed with Bird and Bird for a bit, studied a master's in telecommunications, media, and technology, and then came back to South Africa, worked for a big firm for 4 years, from 2000 to 2004, in their TMT department, and then set up Hokube P.S. Masitela with 2 other lawyers in 2004. And of course, my focus has always been technology law. It's focused on these, as the name says it, technology, media, and telecommunications. So dealing with aspects from networking to fiber infrastructure, to the communications aspects, freedom of expression, all the stuff that's in the Constitution, Section 14 and 16. And it's really been fun. And the exciting part about this area of the law is that it's constantly changing. You can tell from Leah's enthusiasm that there's something new all the time. It's never the same. So my journey, yes, has been a pretty roundabout one, from being a human rights lawyer ending up to being a tech lawyer and absolutely loving it, because it changes all the time. There's never 1 month where you're doing the same thing. There's always something new.
Oh, that's amazing. And I love that story. And as you say, very similar to a lot of people who've stumbled upon tech law. And what I've noticed more recently with the younger lawyers, they are actually aware tech law exists and they want to actively become tech lawyers. Whereas I think a little while ago, we didn't actually have enough people out there to know that this was a viable specialization. So for me, that's quite promising to show the growth, in the area. I'd also like you to break down a bit of the terminologies. I think tech as an industry is full of buzzwords and terms. I've heard IT law, technology law, telecoms, communications, privacy law, cyber law, media law. I mean, are they similar, different? Does one lawyer do all of it? Do you have subspecialists? You break down a little bit of the terminology.
Yeah, so I think they're all interlinked, broadly falling under communications. Because if you think about it, freedom of expression involves conveying your ideas. In the old days, you would write something on a piece of paper and stick it in the town square. Nowadays, you put something on Twitter. The other aspect is, how do you get that message across? And that's where telecommunications would come in. This deals with the networks and the infrastructure to convey those messages. So whether it be fiber or whether it be radio waves, there are niche areas within each of these areas of the law that certain lawyers would know a lot more about. So you would have a lawyer who would know a lot about frequency spectrum, radio licensing, and you would have other lawyers who would be more experienced perhaps in the actual infrastructure, dealing with fiber or dealing with cell phone towers. So that would broadly be telecommunications law. Media law would deal a lot more with the freedom of expression aspects of the law. So basically getting your message out there in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution. And as we've seen with many cases, you can say certain things and they might really upset other people, but it's your constitutional right to say that. So those that would fall within freedom of expression, and people who practice in that area would more often than not be focusing on radio, television clients, newspaper clients, online publications, and working with them to protect their right to say or publish what they want to publish. Of course, then you've got cybersecurity or cyber law, which deals and overlaps to a certain extent with privacy. Cyber law would deal with more of the security aspects, your legal obligations. So if you think about a particular piece of legislation, you could look at POPIA, the Protection of Personal Information Act, for those who are not here in South Africa. And it has a section 19, which places obligations on people who are processing personal information. And that in itself would take a lawyer to advise a client how to comply with it. Of course, you would then have the exciting part of consulting with the white hat hackers and all the techie guys to make sure that from a technical perspective, your client is complying with the law. So and privacy law, of course, is looking after and making sure that personal information is not released or used unlawfully out there. So there are all these various areas that overlap because they all relate to how it's transmitted, how it's secured, and which makes it, a really exciting area of the law. You'd get people like yourself, perhaps, who specialize in very niche areas, blockchain, which I can't even spell, so you've got people who are super specialized, and then you've got some who are able to really cover a broad area and would call on specialists like yourself, like I've done in the past with you, to come and help with very, very complex areas. So it's an exciting and broad area. I hope I've given a good idea of what those various...
I mean, that was such a great explanation. I just want to quickly deal with some questions coming up in the chat. Do we ask questions as we go, or is there going to be a Q&A at the end? You're welcome to put in questions at the chat. I will be checking it as we go along. I may ask questions during the session, or I may save them for the end. We'll just have to see how we go. But there is actually one that I want to ask Lucien right now that we just got. Are tech qualifications a barrier to entry to technology law? So how can just a general legal practitioner become more active with the tech law market? What steps, so somebody has an interest, they're practicing law, do they need tech qualifications? How do you participate in this area?
Is that from Jatin, I think?
Yes.
So this is actually, one of the best questions. Many people exclude themselves and think that they cannot practice this area of the law. But the reality is I have absolutely no tech qualifications whatsoever. The best or the closest I came to computing was doing an Excel course way back then with a company called Coopers and Leybron, which doesn't even exist anymore. But the point is, in reading, looking at the various laws and familiarizing yourself with the legislation, I suppose, and industry publications, you're able to pick up over time what various terms relate to. You're more a lawyer than a techie, but it's important to understand what the terminology is and how these various pieces of technology work. Let me give you a simple example. You have, in the old days, we had the Telecommunications Act, which basically distinguished a network up to a client's house, and you had the service providers network, and then you had something called customer premises equipment. Sounds complicated, but all you need to realize is that customer premises equipment, if you have fiber, is that little box in your house, and then the service provider's network is everything on the other side. So just by doing basic reading and trying to understand these things, you will become familiar with the technology aspects, and then you can apply the law very clearly to this type of work. You do not need to be a tech lawyer. Any qualification will suffice. You go out there and you look at some of the best technology lawyers, Leah and Darushka included. I'm sure that they haven't done any IT degrees or diplomas or anything like that, but they are excelling at what they do.
Yeah, and I think just further than that, technology is touching all parts of our lives now. So I think it doesn't matter what area of law you actually practice in. You could be a banking and financial regulatory lawyer. Fintech is huge right now. If you don't understand certain basic technologies, how does the cloud work, for example, how will you adequately service your banking clients? or your insurance clients? What about drones if you're in the aviation sector? I think technology is really touching every single part of our lives, and I don't think understanding how technology works should be left in the domain of the tech lawyers. So if you're on here and you think you do need to broaden or understand those basics, I think do try. You don't have to go and, as Lucien said, study an entire degree to get that information. We're living in the age of information. Information is really at your fingertips. So we just have so much of opportunity today. And talking about opportunities, Lucien, I mean, what are the opportunities for somebody who wants to specialize in tech law? I mean, are we in a saturated market? Is everybody becoming a tech lawyer? You know, is it something that people should pursue?
Yeah, so I think that there is so much opportunity for anyone who wants to get into this space. You know, the way South Africa is going, and if everything works out, you know, we've got so many plans. We've got the 4IR Commission. We've got a whole lot of research papers that are out there. We've got the ICT white paper, which defines how South Africa is going to proceed in terms of its ICT plan. There is a lot on the cards. Now, a lot of people complain that that is just talk. But if we really get things into gear, a lot of our economy is going to be based on IT and IT infrastructure. There are going to be many different types of lawyers that are required to deal with this. From content, if you think about it, content, my view is that very soon data is going to be so cheap or almost free. And what you're going to be paying for is the content. So who are the lawyers who are going to do the contracts between the content producers and the broadcasters, if you want to call it that? Think about gaming. Gaming is taking off. Who is going to deal with those? Who's going to deal with those contractual aspects? There's going to be a broad area that falls within IT law, ICT law, 4IR related work that's going to need advice. And it need not be at the most complex level. You could perhaps establish a niche as a young lawyer, servicing startup content producers, doing all their contractual work, startup IT companies. And those are just simple examples. And then you get into more complex areas, drone law, satellite and space law. You know, I think it's boundless. And if I was a lawyer right now, I'm a lawyer, someone starting out, I would certainly investigate this area. It is really exciting. And, you know, it's been exciting ever since. When I came back and I started at the law firm in Johannesburg that I worked for, Weber Wenzel, the coolest department was called the media department, because at that time it was the Y2K, it was 2000, and everybody in that department was regarded as the coolest person in the firm. And I still think it's cool to be a tech lawyer because you're dealing with all these really cutting edge, interesting aspects. So yes, I think there's certainly room for it. I think there will be a market, and I think there will be opportunity for anyone who wants to work in this space. And I'd encourage anyone to look at this area. What you should probably do is to try and get into a firm that specializes in this area, because you'll be able to get into it a lot more quickly with the knowledge of all the other lawyers in the firm filtering down to you. I'm not saying it's impossible to start out on your own, but you will get a lot more off the ground a lot more quickly if you're in a firm that specializes in this area.
No, that's excellent advice. And I think also the increase in regulation we're seeing perhaps also opens up some opportunities. So with POPIA finally coming into force, enforcement starting on the 1st of July, 2021, I mean, just by looking at the increase in job adverts that I'm seeing for data privacy lawyers and data privacy officers, in-house counsel that companies are looking for, you know, that in itself is an opportunity for somebody in the space. So I think opportunities really sound boundless. I'm going to ask you another question from the attendees. Leonie says, what is your opinion on the idea that in a corporate environment where the company uses technology as a backbone, it is the ethical duty of the legal counsel to understand the technical and security risks? So, you know, do lawyers actually have an ethical duty to understand these risks?
So my view is yes. You need to have an understanding of how everything works, even if it's a basic understanding. I'm not sure you can properly advise a corporate or a client on what their contractual or regulatory obligations are if you don't understand the basics of this particular aspect that you're dealing with. You know, if you're going to be advising on networking or information security or the cloud, you at least need to know how the cloud works. You know, most people, and when I talk about cloud computing and how to lawfully abide with the laws, my first slide has a little cloud and it says, there is no cloud, it's just somebody else's computer. I mean, there are still people who believe that out there's some cloud that, you know, your data sits in. But knowing the basics allows you to advise your clients or corporates better. And I think you can't give your best unless you know how things work in the sector, even if it's just the basics.
Mm-hmm. And another question from the floor: how do we keep up to date with latest developments in the tech space? So I think, you know, valid question. It's always so fast, so moving so fast. Things are changing all the time. Who do we look to actually keep up to date with those developments?
So I have a routine. Credible news sites I check out at least twice a day, first thing when I get up and just before I go to bed, because there are always interesting things happening towards the end of the day and at the start of the day. That's what I do. I subscribe to many publications and websites like TechCrunch. That's one of the more credible ones. I also look at Forbes. One of the most useful tools you can use to keep up to date on developments is an app called Flipboard. And what it allows you to do is to choose your categories of news and information, and it then actually aggregates it for you. So you can choose regulatory law, you can choose IT, you can choose privacy, and you'll see reports from across the globe on developments in that regard. The other way that I keep up to date is every Friday afternoon, I check the Government Gazette to make sure and check what has come out, because that's typically where ICT-related regulations are first published. If I can give you a piece of advice, you always look really good as a lawyer if you're the first one to put something out there about a new development. So if you're checking out government gazettes regularly, you'll be able to keep up to date with what's going on and be the first one to be commenting out there and be a thought leader.
Excellent, excellent advice. And also want to know, where does South Africa stand in the ecosystem? So South African tech law, tech lawyers, the market and the opportunities compared to the rest of the continent, as well as on a global scale?
I like to think that that we're at the forefront of technology as far as lawyers are concerned. Now, just from my own perspective, what I find is that foreign clients, and we do a fair amount of work for foreign clients, typically start out with South Africa as a base, set up here, understand our regulatory regime, and then from here, start moving up north into the rest of Africa with guidance from us. I'm not saying that tech lawyers in other jurisdictions are not up to speed. I've dealt with excellent lawyers, but I've found that a lot of our clients start out simply, I'm not sure why, and then what we then do is liaise with lawyers in other jurisdictions to seek guidance as we set up there. But I certainly think that we're at the forefront of technology. You know, if you take Papaya, we took forever to get it promulgated, but I see that now there are other African countries that are also starting to push laws like their own Papaya equivalents in their jurisdictions. So yeah, I think you know, there are very, very good lawyers out in the rest of Africa, but I think we're on par.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm going to bring you back into the conversation now. We had another question from the floor. Maybe you can tackle this one. Would you consider cyber insurance as an area legal techs should invest in?
Yeah, definitely. It's not something that has been really delved into in South Africa specifically. So it's an area that can be looked into specifically. You know, obviously, if you've seen a gap, because at the end of it, legal technology is really, you know, like a normal business, like, you know, your fintech spaces. If you see an opportunity and you see a way to solve a specific issue, integrating technology, then go for it.
And another question from the floor. Do you think smaller law firms will move towards things like automating contracts? And in addition to that question, how do you see AI impacting legal practice?
Look, adoption rates are quite difficult, specifically in law firms. But the biggest chunk that makes up the legal industry is actually solo practitioners, so your small firms. Uh, Personally, I'd love to see a move more from them, specifically because they need it the most, because they don't have the typical resources that big law firms would have. Because integrating technological solutions into the practice will actually better, the business processes. So in terms of adoption, a lot of people, when we speak about legal tech, specifically in the legal industry, there are a lot of barriers, and one of them is the mindset barriers. Because there's an attitude that is technology going to take over my job? If this thing is going to perform this particular duty for me. So if you're implementing, let's say, document automation as part of your process internally as a law firm, what does that mean for me as a lawyer? So firstly, the first hurdle is tackling the mindset that is attached in terms of technology. And part of it is really included in these type of conversations that we're having today, to really speak to not only in terms of the concepts, but to say this then requires for us as lawyers to start thinking differently, start thinking about the type of value add and type of lawyer that you want to be, so that you're actually not doing the mundane things that you're doing, that you're actually doing legal work in the legal industry, strategic work that you actually studied for, instead of looking to the mundane things that technology could actually assist you with. In terms of AI, we're seeing a lot. So for example, we're seeing a lot of integration into it. In terms of document automation, there are a couple of guys in South Africa, Deep Learning Cafe. They've introduced document AI into document automation. They're selling it to law firms, so that helps a lot. So the implications of it are great. One of it, I've seen an application that actually is an AI that powers a chatbot through Facebook. So it's integrated. These guys are called Luma Law. So what happens if you need advice, you go to their Facebook, into the Facebook Messenger, and then you talk to the chatbot that's AI powered. So the application of artificial intelligence is quite broad in terms of what we could be doing in the legal industry, and we're already seeing it play out in South Africa.
So Leah, I mean, your passion for this industry, for legal tech and innovation, actually led you to write a whole book, author a whole book on this topic. Can you tell us a little bit about your book? What is it called? What is it about? Who should read it? How do we buy it?
Really, the purpose of it, like I said, because I started this in 2017, but I realized that there was a gap and a mismatch in terms of communication, in terms of people understanding how to do this. So the intention behind the book and what really it is about is introducing, these different concepts, people understanding what legal technology is, the different opportunities that are available. And, it goes without saying the technologies. So we're not only even talking about AI. I go into blockchain technology. I go into natural language processing, what that looks like. How that translates into legal practice, how you could integrate it in your business model. So it's really, and I mean, the law is changing. When you look at, the LPA and, the council in terms of what they're trying to push towards a more free transparency vibe. So it really is pushing for lawyers, for law firms to actually find ways that can actually make legal services a bit, I'm not going to say cheap, I'm going to say affordable, but also accessible. And, when we speak about ethics, in as much as we have an ethical duty to keep abreast of, normal legal developments in our own specialities, I honestly believe that there's an ethical obligation on us to actually be kept abreast of relevant technologies that can actually make it easier for us when we're facilitating, legal services for clients. So the book goes, into that. It's called Legal Tech Startups and Innovation, Challenging Traditional Law Firm Models. So I tackle into, the different type of business models that normal law firms, implement and so forth, and really try and dissect, because a lot of issues, when trying to move away from the hourly billing model, would it make sense for a law firm to move away from that? Is it financially viable? And it actually is financially, sustainable. But people are scared, because, they're so used to having and doing things a certain way. When you're trying to innovate and move, I think they call it the innovator's dilemma. So those type of things, it really goes, I deal with that in the book. And the last chapter specifically deals with building your own tools. So I'll take you through steps on how to do it, whether you are an in-house counsel, whether you're a law firm trying to innovate, or whether you're someone like me who just wants to run and be independent. You're entrepreneurial in mindset, and you want to run your own legal tech startup. So how do you do it? Where do you start? The type of thinking that is involved. So it's really a combination of all of these different aspects that people need to look into, and it's relevant. Literally, if you're a lawyer, you need to be having a look at it, and it's available on Juta.
Okay, thanks so much for that info. And I wanted to ask you, so for those of us who want to really find out more about what's going on in the space, could you perhaps name a few startups that are doing cool and innovative things, either locally or globally, that we could go check out and see what they're doing?
Yes, there's a bunch load. So for example, we have guys like Clever Contracts. They are, all for document automated legal contracts, if you need one. And obviously there's, us, my legal, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it. And then you have guys like Luma Law, where they integrate, the chatbot, the service offerings. And then you have people that are looking into specifically really more client-facing type of solutions, like Get Law, that tries to really merge lawyers. So it's really a mixture of the provision of legal services, but also integrating law marketplace. So it's like connecting you to a lawyer, but also during that process, assisting you with your legal services. If it goes, into litigation mode, then it's tapped into a different lawyer. But all of that is systemized, it's automated. So it's really about creating systems that actually make it worth it. It's guys like Law Paddy in Nigeria. It's guys like DIY Law in Nigeria that are doing amazing in terms of empowering people. They can actually go onto the platform and get assistance. It's guys like League It in Uganda, that are offering, legal documents and legal services for small businesses. So, in terms of Africa, we're doing great. There are a lot of startups. The market it's crazy right now, and I'm having a fun time watching it happen.
That's awesome. Sounds very, very positive. Houston, I'm going to jump back to you now, and I just want to talk about a few trending topics in the tech law kind of space. So one recent trending topic is around the recent Netflix documentary called The Social Dilemma, which I'm sure a lot of people have watched already. So what is your view on, the Silicon Valley kind of tech lords controlling so much of our information, and perhaps even manipulating how we spend our time through use of AI and algorithms, and they say they know more about us than we actually know about ourselves. Do you see a shift in behavior as people become more aware of how some of these social media companies function and how these tech companies function? Or do you think we will always be in a situation where people will just choose convenience, things that are free, things that are useful, over privacy and over protecting their data? Where do you see us headed? Lucien, I think you're on mute still, sorry.
My fear of social media started actually when I did my master's way back. And at that point, we were taught that there were only 12 servers in the world. There were 12 servers in the United States through which all the internet traffic actually traveled at that point in time. And we were told about a program called Carnivore that could process, I don't know how many million or billion emails per second and search through them. And at that point, I took a decision that I would stay off social media. So you might go to Facebook and see a Lucien Pierce profile. The only reason that Facebook profile is there is because I had a litigation matter once years ago that required me to have a Facebook account and to do the necessary research. And of course, our firm needs a human being to open up its account. So for me, I'm very, very wary about social media. I am on Twitter and I am on LinkedIn. That's because I have to pay the bills. So I use that predominantly for marketing. But I think that people are becoming a lot more savvy as to what is going on. I do think that there is going to be a move to people taking more control of their personal information. At this point, you know, there might not be sufficient education. And I think as people become wiser and become more aware of what is going on, they're going to become a lot or more jealously guard their personal information. I think that definitely there is manipulation going on. There are many articles out there. The Social Dilemma, I haven't watched it, but I've read the paper that it is based on, talks a lot about how we are manipulated. You know, for example, I don't have alerts on my phone when it comes to LinkedIn or Twitter or any of the other social media platforms that I use, simply because they are mechanisms to distract you from what you are doing. So I think there definitely is a methodology and a science behind it designed to keep us stuck on them. And I think people will learn in time that, you know, that their personal data and their time is worth something, and they shouldn't really be manipulated in the way that they are. I think it's very dangerous. I think it can have really negative effects if you're not on top of it, you don't control it properly.
Okay, that's really insightful to hear. And the other area I wanted to ask you about is data breaches. So we've seen more and more in the news, you know, about data breaches happening. One of the recent large ones being Experian. And now as POPIA is growing closer and closer on 1 July 2021, do you think we will see any change in behavior in how our information is dealt with by corporates in South Africa? Do you think there will be more responsibility? Or do you think the citizens will actually, you know, ask for safety and security of their information? Do you think we'll have a change, or are we just going to continue to see more of these large data breaches?
I think there is going to be a change, particularly as far as the corporates are concerned. I do think that the information regulator, although underfunded at this point in time, is going to take a very hard line on breaches. You asked me if we're going to see more breaches. I think we will. The reason we will see more is not because there's going to be a sudden uptick in them. It's because they're going to have to report them, and that's what POPIA requires. At the moment, they are happening. We advise clients regularly on how to deal with them. And at the moment, of course, because they don't have to report them, and if they have no contractual obligations to third parties, then they can keep it quiet. But once POPIA is fully in effect, I can assure you that we're going to be seeing a lot more of these in the media. At the moment, I think we're finding that more socially responsible corporates, particularly the ones that are subject to GDPR, are volunteering the information. There are others who are simply keeping it quiet because it's not going to come out. But of course, once POPIA is in place, there are big fines for not doing that. So we will see many more being reported. And yeah, I think the information regulator from the 1st of July next year is going to come in waving a very big stick. And I think we're going to see some serious fines for corporates that are not complying.
Okay, and I also wanted to ask you, what do you think a future lawyer looks like? So if you think, you know, 10, 20 years into the future, what is the skill set of that person? You know, what should younger lawyers be doing in addition to the law? Do you have any thoughts or advice? You know, there's a lot of content out there about, you know, legal engineers, lawyers learning how to code, things like that. I'd just love to hear your views on what the future lawyer looks like.
So I think before I even get into that, there is an excellent book. You know the author, Dr. Richard Susskind. He's written a book called Tomorrow's Lawyers. And if there's anyone who plans to practice law or be in-house for the rest of their career, that is an excellent book to read because it gives us an idea of what we should be doing, how we should be running our practices, even in-house departments, to prepare for the future. But I think that lawyers are not just going to be lawyers. You're going to need to be multi-skilled, as you say. We know of the big firms in the UK, Clifford Chance, etc., that are starting to ensure that their trainees take coding classes and learn how to code. I think you're going to need to have various skills if you're going to be successful and stand out as a lawyer in the future. Empathy will be one of them. You know, the days of arrogant lawyers who simply bill what they want, that's gone. Clients are now the ones who are dictating and pushing back on fees. Clients want more attention. They want you to be able to know a bit more about their business and about them. You can't just be this aloof lawyer in the background. So I think you're going to need a lot more skills. Marketing, for example, lawyers are atrocious at marketing. You know, you're going to need to develop those skills as well if you want to stand out. And I do think that unless you have some specialized or speciality that you have to offer, you're not going to stand out. My view is that there's going to be a lot of consolidation. You're going to have small to medium-sized firms that are specialists, and you're going to have big firms that clients who demand this heavyweight bunch of lawyers to service huge transactions. Those are going to remain. So you're going to have these two types of firms. And the smaller firms and medium-sized firms, you'll need to be very multi-skilled to be able to compete with the bigger firms. So I see very talented and multi-skilled lawyers in the future. And I think it's going to be a very exciting time to be a lawyer.
Sounds very exciting. My last question to you is, if you, knowing everything you know now, and if you had to go back to before you started studying, would you advise your younger self to study law?
I would. In all honesty, I hated studying law. Like I said, I had wanted to be an engineer, but law was the only thing that I was accepted into. But I wouldn't change a thing. Once I started practicing and appreciating the importance and what real law is about, particularly when I did my human rights work, I realized that it's a real profession that can make a difference. And I lie to myself nowadays, telling myself that with all the communications and telecommunications work that we're doing, we're working on behalf of the Constitution to make sure that people get the information they need. But I would certainly not change a thing. And as tough as it was getting into law, I mean, I struggled to find articles, and this is a message to those out there who are really struggling to find articles. Don't give up. There's an article out there that I wrote about how difficult it was, but how it pays off in the end, to persevere. There are people like Sanushka Chetty, who served articles at my firm. She walked the streets of Joburg for months and months, handing out CVs at every law firm she could come across. And if you Google her, you'll see where she is now. So yeah, just persevere.
Pretty cool. Thanks so much, Lucien. We'll come back in a second for closing. Yeah, I just want to jump to you quickly. I have one or two more questions to squeeze in before our time is up. What's your view on virtual courts? Priya asked on the chat, what's your view on virtual courts, and will we anticipate more virtual courts in the near future after we've now experienced it during this period of COVID?
In my view, I think South Africa is actually moving towards that, and it would actually make sense for us to do that, because when we speak of court technology and virtual courts, there are different technologies that can actually assist in that space. So, the integration of queue management systems, when you look at, overcrowded spaces, so for example, in maintenance court, it's always full. So when you integrate those type of systems, for those who don't know, so for example, when you go to your bank or SARS, and you're given, a card to say, your matter is going to, your issue or whatever you be dealt with in a couple of minutes, it gives you the estimated time space. So those type of things being integrated into, how courts function can actually assist. And when you look at where we're moving, so for example, or we have actually case lines that's actively working in the Gauteng region. That's actually a court management software where lawyers can file online, book updates online. Obviously, there's still teething problems and in relation to that. But I think, you know, for all its bad things that it has brought, really, part of the pandemic has really pushed for the legal industry to start thinking out of the box. And I mean, with the move to make sure, you know, gender violence-based type of matters can be facilitated online by the ministry. So those are positive steps that are actually being taken around. And I think it is something that we can actually look forward to for it to actually be happening. And that is going to require of lawyers to actually start thinking differently. And, you know, while we're here, the other thing that I wanted to add in terms of, you know, the future lawyer, you know, there's something, especially for someone who wants to future-proof their career. If you can look into the concept, obviously I deal with it to a certain extent in my book, but it's called the T-shaped lawyer. So it looks at how, you know, the type of skills that we need. It's not only from a linear perspective in terms of legal knowledge, it's practice management, I mean, project management, innovation. Are you thinking out of the box? It's about technology. It's about understanding analytics. Are you able to analyze things like that? Communication skills. Are you showing empathy? Your people skills, people management skills.
Leah? Okay, I think Leah's dropped off the line. So I think we got a little
things
bit
like that can actually be your differentiator as we.
Okay, Leah, I think your line is actually dropping. So I'm gonna have to end there. Thank you so much for everybody for joining us today. Thank you so much to Lucy, and thank you so much to Leah for sharing your insight and your time and your knowledge with us today. It was really, I had a lot of fun in this discussion, learned a lot about both of you and about the areas. Thank you so much to the attendees for your engagement and your questions. I know we didn't get through all of the questions in the session, unfortunately, but we will be planning more events, more speakers. You know, we will be looking at individual topics and trying to share knowledge on more specific topics, whether on tech law or on legal tech, and getting the relevant people in to share that knowledge with you. Stay in touch with us, you know, tell us what type of content you're looking for, because we want to design things that are for the community, that are relevant to you, and information that you do need. So, you know, I'm very happy with everybody and how everything went today, and quite excited for the next steps from here. So thank you very much to everyone.